I name players I'd be shocked to see the Jaguars take in the first round in a couple of weeks during the NFL draft. I'll tell you who they are in just a second.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining me, Tony Wiggins, here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. Special shout out to all of our everydayers here on Locked On Jaguars. For those that don't know, you can subscribe for free on the YouTube page, Locked On Jaguars. And for those that do audio podcasts, whatever platform you listen to, make sure you check them out every day, because it's your team every day, to make sure you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free bonus and free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. What y'all say there, man? What's going on today? All right, we've been talking so much about the draft, talking so much about who the Jags should take, who they would take, who they won't take. I'm going to tell you today who I'd be totally shocked and surprised if they took them. Now, that does not mean that they won't take said players, but I'd be shocked and surprised if they took these guys. And I'll tell you what I did to come up with this list. I looked at needs, I looked at positional value, but more importantly, I paid attention to the Jaguars and who they are and what they do and how they do it. So this isn't about me and just my opinion alone. It's more about me and my opinion based on who they are and what they do and what I think the tendencies are. So a lot of Jaguar fans feel like, hey, they're going to the Super Bowl or they're going to compete for a Super Bowl if they do certain things. They got to get this, they got to get that. It is to the point now where in the team building phase, because there's been a lot of success, that many folks are cherry picking and saying, all we need is this, this, and this, and we're going to the Super Bowl. And I understand that line of thinking. I really, really do. I don't necessarily think it's wrong, but I'd be cautious because teams usually build their team with the thought of, if we just build it the correct way, especially once you get a quarterback, then good things will happen. The closer teams get, you hear the term going for it, right? The closer teams get, they tend to try to go out and collect that one last piece that puts them over the hump. I'll give you a perfect example. Once the Rams they already had Aaron Donald, they already had Jalen Ramsey. Once they went out and got Matthew Stafford, then they said, okay, let's get another piece. Got Odell, got Von Miller. It was very, very easy for them to say, let's go for it and go grab other pieces. I think Jaguar fans kind of believe that that's where they are right now. I don't know that I agree, but I'm not going to strongly disagree with it because everyone's entitled to their opinion. And as I've been telling people over the last couple of weeks, especially friends of mine, I don't mind any backlash or criticism from anybody because the Jaguars fan base and their hopes is tied to their optimism, and their opinions are tied to their optimism and the hope that this is the year that they make that next jump. So it almost seemed like if Jaguar fans don't at least think that, okay, we can go for it, that they're hustling backwards, that they're pretending to believe something that they know can't happen. And I don't think that that is the case. I actually think it's a good thing that people are not being pessimistic this time of year, because in the past, that's exactly what everybody was, man. Everybody thought, oh, here we go again. It was always the attitude was, here we go again, Same old Jaguar, same. Well, no, it's not. It's not. And you should not think that. When you have a franchise quarterback, things, I wouldn't say they get easier, but they do become more clear, which is why it's easier for me to sit here and say I'd be shocked if they take certain players in the draft. Now, the players have to reasonably have a decent shot of landing with them. I ain't put Jalen Carter on this list because Jalen Carter's not, they take Jalen Carter in a heartbeat, but he's not coming this way. I didn't put Jackson Smith and Jigba, even though the team is sort of loaded at wide receiver. I don't think he's going to even be close to here. So I didn't include those guys that are considered the consensus number one, top guys. I just didn't. I would, however, be interested, and you can answer this one before we start getting to these names. If the Jags were in the top 10, who would they be targeting? Would it be Will Anderson? Would it be Tyree Smith? Would it be Gonzalez, the corner out of Oregon? No, I think, to me, even though he may not fit all the traits, I think Devin Witherspoon, if the Jaguars were, say, not top, if they were top 5, obviously they don't need a quarterback and they wanted to get out of there and move back to 7, 8, or 9. I think the guy that they target would be Devin Witherspoon. At least that's who I believe because if you look at all of the players, at all the positions that they need, doesn't he just fit so perfectly? I mean, he could play inside until he plays outside. So I've always said that get you a nickel that can play inside. If you're going to use a first-round pick on a guy to play the slot, make sure he can do more than just play the slot. Because there are going to be some times when a team may go to a different formation and your slot corner or your nickel comes out of the game. So you're not even in a nickel anymore. So if you're going to use a first-round pick on a guy, make sure he's versatile enough to do more than one thing. Or that one thing better be one of those 6 critical positions that we always discuss and always talk about. I ain't gonna hold you. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get ready to load up in segment number 2. And what we're gonna do in segment 2, man, is we're gonna talk about these players who could reasonably make it to the Jaguars, who would absolutely shock me if they got to that point and the Jaguars took them. It would be a total surprise. I'll tell you who they are in just a second. I already told you who one of them was yesterday, in case you didn't hear it. I'll tell you who they are in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. After I let you know about today's sponsor, which is, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard me talk about this mobile game app that I played while I was on a couple of flights, 4 to be exact, in the last month. And if you ever thought you'd make a good GM, you got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. Now, we sit here all day and criticize Trent Baalke and talk about and give him nicknames and all of that stuff and talk about what he should and shouldn't be doing. Try this for size and try to play this game and then see if you have a little different perspective on what an actual GM has to do. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, managing all the finances, including negotiating player salaries and terms, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, injuries, all of that stuff, player personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Jaguars listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in all caps in the game store. Now, it's Locked On in all caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. You start here with us here on Locked On Jaguars, and we absolutely appreciate you doing that, making us your first listen because it's your team every day. I'm your host, Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, and Shout out again to all my everydayers. And let's get to this list, man. So I was doing a draft yesterday, and we talked about Bijan Robinson. Look, there are folks that think he's the top 5 prospect in this draft. There are others that say you never take a running back in the first round, even though the Jaguars did that a couple of years ago with Travis Etienne, which is why, even though some people who consider Bijan generational, and with the thought that Doug Peterson loves to use multiple running backs, I doubt very seriously if they would consider Bijan Robinson, even if they had him ranked very high, and even if he came back to him. They did this with James Robinson. So I kind of understood when James Robinson was coming. They drafted a running back, but that running back, Travis Etienne, had something that James Robinson didn't have. And what that is noticeable game-breaking speed. Even though Robinson had some runs that were very, very long, you saw last year, Travis Etienne is a threat to take the ball to the house on every single play, and he actually did on more than one occasion. That makes him a home run threat. That makes him combustible. It makes him somebody that could get you those easy points, right? You don't want all of your points to be difficult, and those are easy points. I'm not saying it's easy to make a 75-yard touchdown run, but I am saying that once a guy like that with that type of speed gets to the second level, it's easy to feel like he's going all the way every single time because it just feels that way when you watch it. And James Robinson didn't give you that. He didn't give New York that, So now, when you look at it and think about it, as good as Bijan Robinson is, and he's very good, would he make their offense better? Yes, he would. But he'd only make it better because if you gave half the carries to him and half to Travis Etienne, they'd both be dynamic, I believe. The problem is I don't want to spend a first-round draft pick on a guy I give the ball half the time. So folks will say, well, what about receiver? If you draft another receiver, he's not going to get the ball thrown to him all the time when you already have 2 or 3 guys. I get it. You're right. He won't. But guess what? No receiver gets the ball as much as a running back does if he's a featured back. I think Etienne is a good back. I understand getting someone to complement him, but you don't use a first-round pick to get a complimentary running back. Speaking of wide receivers, how about Jordan Addison? That's number 2. I'd be absolutely surprised if the Jaguars drafted Jordan Addison. Notice, I did not say I'd be absolutely shocked and surprised if they drafted a wide receiver. I might be a little surprised and shocked, but if they went for Quentin Johnson, if he fell to him, or if they went and got a big, tall receiver, or just another serious stretch the field dude, I wouldn't trip out on it. I'd be like, well, dang, that's a lot of resources to use. But by the same token, you want to give Trevor Lawrence as many weapons as possible for him to throw the ball downfield to. Jordan Addison isn't that guy. In fact, I think Jordan Addison is a poor man's guy of 2 guys we have on the roster right now. I don't think he's Calvin Ridley, even though there are some people that have done that comp. And a lot of things that you're going to ask him to do, Christian Kirk already does it. You don't need another guy like that. In fact, it would look a little bit redundant to have a guy like Jordan Addison be your first-round pick. The next one is Brian Bresee. Now, these are people that I reasonably think the Jaguars have a chance to touch in the draft. Brian Bresee, I don't know where you play him in the NFL. I watched his tape. I didn't watch his highlight tape because and please don't watch his high school highlight tape because he looks like the second coming of J.J. Watt, right? And you watch his highlight tape, you still see him making a lot of plays. He's very energetic and demonstrative, makes a lot of plays and lets you know he made the plays. But I just can't see a role for him here that requires a first-round pick. And then it would almost feel like Taven Bryan 2.0 to me, even though I think he's a lot better than that. I just don't know what he is. Is he a 5 technique? Is he a 3 technique? Is he really a great pass rusher? Or was it that he was just surrounded by a lot of people? I saw a lot of his tape where he didn't win. And I saw a lot of tape that looked like he didn't have real strong lower body. So I think I don't know why the reason he's slipping in the draft, but I can tell you this. I wouldn't take him at 24. And if the Jaguars do, it's going to be something that is a total shock and surprise to me. All right, we got three more or two more, and we're going to name both of those two. This might shock you a little bit. One's a pass rusher. Well, they're both pass rushers, but one plays on the inside, one plays on the outside. I'm going to tell you who they are, and I'm going to do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, man. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm going to mention it to you real quick. Shout out to everybody that made us your first listen today because it's your team every day. And shout out to our everydayers. We have some stuff. I want you to make these things your second listen. I want you to look forward to. We got a draft special where we had a mock draft. It's going to go over a 2-day period next week. All right. Not early in the week, but the closer you get to the NFL draft, that's when we're going to have these mock drafts. And let me tell you something. You are going to absolutely hate something that I did, but you might like it once you realize why I did it. Look forward to that. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcast here on Locked On Jaguars. Now, two more players that are shocked. I would be absolutely shocked if they were the 24th pick in the draft. And once again, we're doing this for players who reasonably might be in play for the Jaguars. Some guys that I've seen on mocks go to the Jaguars. And I said, no, that would really disappoint me, and it would probably disappoint a lot of people. Kalijah Kancey. I believe that's how you say his name. It's either Kalijah or Kalijah. But we're just going to go Mr. Kancey out of Pittsburgh, the guy that they love to sit here and want to try to compare to Aaron Donald. I think in that Aaron Donald conversation, I even said, it reminds me a little more of John Randall. And those are two Hall of Famers, right? I don't think he's that. Funny line from one night. We were doing something within our network, and somebody said, if his arms were 2 inches longer, and they interrupted the person and said, but they're not, right? I think he'll be able to play in the league. I think he'll be a good player in the league. I don't think he's someone, when you view him from a prospect standpoint, that you could risk a first-round pick on unless your gut feeling and your cachet and your building as a GM is that big that you can pull it off. So Kalijah Kancey, I just don't think this is the way that they're going to go. Even though they need rush, they need pressure from the inside. In their system, the only place he could play is the 3 technique, and they just gave Roy Robertson Harris 3 years and $30 million, which is the same reason I say don't take Bresee, because if he's a 3, he'd have to compete with Roy Robertson Harris, who you paid a lot of money, or he'd have to compete with either Devon Hamilton or Foley Fatukasi, wherever you line them up. Sometimes they switch those guys around. He ain't beat neither one of those guys out. And I don't think their team is, even though all drafts are sort of a look forward, and the teams that do it well aren't necessarily filling immediate needs, I don't think this team is in a position to be looking ahead and looking forward. Roy Robertson Harris didn't go anywhere. He just extended. Foley probably has at least another year or two here. I just don't think it's worth it. If anything, you move Trayvon inside when you go to a sub package. But Kalijah Kancey be a guy. And because he just doesn't fit the traits that we always talk about with Trent Baalke. The last but not least is a guy that I actually liked a lot during the draft process because I watched his tape. Then his measurements came out, and I didn't really like his measurements, like the 3-cone and some of these drills that everyone looks at. Trayvon Walker got drafted where he got drafted because of what they believe is his upside, but also the upside was supported by very good workouts and very, good drills and how he did his work. BJ Ojulari is the guy I'm talking about from LSU. And I know they need edge. I just don't think the length is there. I don't think the twitchiness and the lateral quickness is where they probably want it to be. it would feel almost like, and I hate doing this because the guy's from the same school, because this is not why I'm saying it, but it would feel Kayvon Chason like, right? And mind you, the Jags need edge, but they have 3 first-round picks at those positions, and it's still the most important piece and probably the weakest position in terms of being able to rush the passer, not total, not run, stopping the run and all of that stuff. Pass rush is the thing that they have to get better at. And while I think BJ Ojulari is going to be able to play, it's also like the same reason a guy like Arden Key fell in the draft, and he was thought to be a first-round pick by a lot of people, and it did not happen. It's probably the reason Dewan Smoot was thought to be a first-round pick and ended up a third-round pick the following year, is because once they pull out the microscope and take a closer look, and they see something that they don't like, folks start to nitpick. So there you go. Those are the 5 guys that I would be shocked that have been mentioned with the Jaguars or have been linked to the Jaguars to some certain degree or extent. I don't believe any of these dudes came in on one of those 30 visits. But Bijan Robinson, who I think will be a really good player, but I just don't think it's the right time for the Jaguars. Kalijah Kancey, who I think is going to be a nice piece for somebody, just not here and just not now. I think it's a situational pass rusher, and he'll probably go to a team that just uses guys in some sort of amoeba defense. Brian Bursey, I just can't see where he fits and plays here in Jacksonville, and I didn't like his. I like his highlights. I didn't like his tape as much as I thought I would. Jordan Addison, I didn't like his tape as much as I thought I would either, and I think he'd be very redundant as a player here. And BJ Ojulari, the edge out of LSU, that caps the top 5 guys that would shock me, seriously shock me, if they were the choices. Hang tough all weekend. You guys take care of each other, and we'll get ready for the draft starting on Monday, and it's going to start counting down, man. I'm telling you, you will flat out really, really enjoy all of the coverage between now and next week. Until then, you guys take care. I'm Tony Wiggins. See you next time on Locked On Jaguars.